Okay. Okay, dear students. Now we have already discussed what is an ode, what are the different forms of ode, how odes were written in the beginning, and who are the different poets who have tried their hand at writing odes. And there are, I gave you some information about the life, the biography of John Keats. Then we talked about some of the important poems written by John Keats, and then we moved on to the text in the last lecture. And from this text, now we will discuss the sum and the substance of the poem, the stanza-wise paraphrasing of the poem, and after that, we will move on to the critical analysis of the poem. The text is in front of you, and I hope you must have the hard copy of the text in front of you as well. I told you that there are three stanzas in the poem. I will see, students, let me tell you one thing. There is a difference between how we teach poetry and how we teach prose. Like in prose, it's about the literal translation, it's about translating the text as far as I mean, how to get to the meaning of the prose. You have to discuss it, like you have to translate it. But poetry is a bit different. Poetry is to be critically analyzed. Summary is an important part of poetry. I understand that, but then it has to be, you have to critically analyze it, right? So we will first discuss the summary of the poem, and then we will move on to the critical analysis of the poem, and then different features of the poem as well. I am reading the text in front of you. Seasons of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun. Right? The like I told you when we discussed ode, I told you that ode is a poem in which the poet addresses somebody. So here the poet is addressing the season autumn. He says the season autumn is associated with mist. Mist means वो जो धुंधलापन होता है, जो धुंध होती है. It is associated with mist, and there is a general sense of abundance around because there are lots of fruits around. And then he says, close bosom friend of the maturing sun. And then he addresses autumn season and says that you are a close friend of the sun, because the heat and the light from the sun helps the fruits and vegetables to grow. So he says this autumn season and sun are very close friends, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run. He says that autumn season works closely with sun to make lots of fruits grow on the vines. I hope you understand what vines are. Those vines that round the thatch eaves run. Those vines which are, which surround the roof edges of the houses, which surround the roof, the thatch eaves hota hai wahi jo roof ke edges hote hain, which surround the roof edges of the houses, to bend with apples the mossed cottage trees and fill all fruits with ripeness to the core. Then he says that this autumn season works the fruits to grow to the extent that sometimes we feel like that this weight of the ripe fruits, it weighs down the branches of the mossy apple trees, those apple trees which are full of fruits. In the autumn season, we feel like their branches will break down now. And then he talks about and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, and all the fruits, they get ripe, because in the spring season you can see flowers around. In the autumn season you see those flowers getting developed into fruits, and then these fruits getting ripened to swell the gourd and plumb the hazel shells. Now he talks about the other fruits. He says that the gourds swell, they grow bigger in size in autumn season, and hazel shells too grow fat with the sweet nut inside, with the sweet fruit inside, with a sweet kernel, to set budding more and still more later flowers for the bees. And then what happens? There are flowers around. There are flowers, there are buds, there are flowers, and bees fly around those flowers, because those flowers are full of pollen grains, those flowers are full of nectar. So those bees, they fly around those flowers until they think warm days will never cease, and until those bees think that these warm days, these good days, these beautiful days will never end. Cease means to end. For summer has overbrimmed their clampy cells. He is talking about, the poet is talking about the beehives where the bees live. He says that these bees think that this warm day will last forever. This warm day will never end, because 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 they are because due to the flowers around, due to the nectar around, due to the juice of the flowers around, their beehives are full of honey. They are overbrimmed. Overbrimmed means full to the brim. So they are overbrimmed. For summer has overbrimmed their clampy cells. Clampy cells is, he's talking about the small cells, those chambers which you can see in the beehives. So this is the summary of stanza number 1. In the stanza number 2, he addresses autumn season and he asks a question. He says, who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? He questions the autumn season. He says, who has not noticed you? And then he gives us the answer where you can see the autumn season. He is actually personifying the autumn season. He is talking to the autumn season as if autumn season is a person. He says, who has not seen the oft amid thy store? Who has not seen you in your store? Thee means you, thy means your. In your store. Which store he is talking about now? He says, sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor. He says that sometimes we can see you sitting on the floor of a building, on the floor of a room where the grains are stored. See, most of the students here are from villages. You understand that when we get the grains, when we harvest our crops, we bring those grains, we dry them, and we keep them, we store them in the rooms, in a building, or in your houses in different ways. So he says that autumn season is like a person who sits on the floor of a room where those grains are stored. And then he says, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind. And he talks about the hair. He gives us an idea. He personifies the autumn season as if the autumn season is a woman, a beautiful woman. And he says that your hair is lifted by the wind, by the winnowing wind. Winnowing is a process where you separate grains from the husk. Like you might have noticed in villages, when you get those grains, and वो नहीं होता, वो खड़े रहते हैं और ऐसे ऐसे हिलाते हैं हम ग्रेन्स को, ग्रेन्स नीचे गिरते हैं और जो हस्क होता है, घास फूस होता है, वो हवा से थोड़ा दूर जाके गिरता है. That is the process of what we call winnowing. और so this is one personification. वो ग्रैनरी फ्लोर वो अपने रूम में होता है, ऑटम सीजन को पर्सोनिफाई कर रहा है. एक लेडी जैसे बैठी होती है, या एक पर्सन की तरह आप बात कर सकते हैं. जरूरी नहीं है कि एक वुमेन की तरह ही पर्सोनिफाई किया गया है इस ऑटम सीजन को. सो ही सेज दैट the autumn season is personified as if he is sitting on the floor of that granary, that granary, that building or that room where grains have been kept. Now he talks about the next personification. He says, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with fumes of poppies. Then he says that you are a harvester. He is talking about harvesting now. First he was talking about storing the grains, harvest, this winnowing, and now he is talking about a harvester, because harvesting is done in autumn season. So he says that we can see you as a person who has half-reaped furrow sound asleep, who is sleeping in his field after harvesting some part of the crops, after harvesting some plants, some crop. Now he is asleep in the fields on an incompletely harvested crop row, and he is tired because of the sleep inducing aroma, the scent of the poppies. Poppy is a kind of flower. So he says that there are poppy flowers around, and when you harvest your crops, the aroma, wo jo khushbu hoti hai, that aroma that lulls you to sleep. So you are sleeping in your field, while thy hook is that what we call sickle, that tool which is used to harvest, spares the next swath and all its twin flowers. And the next swath, the next bundle of the crops, which you have, the next bundle of the plants, the small plants, those crops, which you have taken in the hand for harvesting, but they have been spared now because you have fallen asleep. And sometimes, like a gleaner, thou dost keep steady thy leaden head across a brook. And then he again personifies autumn season as a gleaner. He says that sometimes autumn season can be seen as a laborer, as an agricultural laborer, as a farmer who picks up loose, who picks up bundles of those crops on his head, and then he crosses a stream with a heavy load of that crop, those fruits or those harvest, whatever has been harvested, that has been kept on his head. And the autumn season is personified as a laborer, as if he is crossing or as if she is crossing. You can even use the pronoun he or she, it's up to you, but most of the people have analyzed it as if the autumn season has been personified as a woman, not as a man. So the next one is steady thy laden head. Laden head means your head is full of that load across a brook. Brook means a stream, a small stream. Or the next personification, the fourth personification is by a cedar press with patient look, thou watched the lost oozings hours by hours. Then he he says, sometimes you are seen in a cedar press. Cedar press is a press where fruits are, crushed and juice is made, juice is prepared. He says that sometimes we see you patiently watching that machine, that press where the juices comes out of the fruits like apples, and you are sitting there, you are watching how that juice is coming out slowly. It's oozing out of that machine over the course of many hours. So he says, you watch the last oozings, those drops are falling down, and you are watching those drops coming from the fruits in that cedar press. So this is stanza number second of the poem. We will move on to the third stanza now. Where are these two lines are very important. Where are the songs of spring? Where are they? Think not of them. Thou hast thy music too. Now he's again asking a question. A kind of interrogatory tone is adopted by the poet, and he says that he asks the autumn, where are the songs of spring? Because most of the times, most of the poetry or most of the poets have written on spring season. Bahar pe zyada likha gaya hai. So mostly spring season is associated with beauty, but this poem is different in the sense that autumn too is being associated with beauty by the poet. So he says, where are the songs of spring? Where are they? He says, where are the songs of spring? Because spring season has already passed. It has already moved on to the autumn season now. So he says, the poet says, where are the songs of spring? Where are they? Think not of them. Then he answers, let us not think about the spring season. Let us not think about the songs and the music of spring season. He says, thou hast thy music too. You have your music too. Then he says to the autumn season that you too have your music. It's not like only spring season has its music. So he says, where is the music that characterizes spring? And then he says that you have your own music. Let us not think about the spring season. While barred clouds bloom the soft dying day and touch the subtle plains with rosy hue. Then he talks about the evening season. It is the sunset. He says, the music is a scene in which there is beautiful shadowed clouds are expanding in the sky, in the evening sky, and they filter sunlight. The sunlight gets filtered through those clouds, and now you can see those fields while barred clouds bloom the soft dying day, and the day starts dying slowly. Day starts dying slowly means the day is coming to an end now, and we are approaching towards the evening now. And touch the subtle plains with rosy hue. Rosy hue means that orange color, that yellowish color which you see towards the sunset in the sky. Then in a wailful choir, the small gnats mourn. And now he's saying there is a mourning, mourn. There is matam jisko aap bolte ho. There's a sad music. That sad music is produced by small gnats. It's a small insect. It mourns. it expresses sadness on the death of the day, because the day is coming to an end. So these, these knots, they produce a kind of music. So they hum very mournfully among the willow trees, which we will see in the other lines, among the river shallows borne aloft. So there is music, there is that wailful songs being sung by these small knots, or sinking as the light wind leaves or dies, or sinking as the light wind leaves or dies, and the day is sinking, the day is coming to its end as the light wind leaves or dies. Sometimes there is wind which is on a higher side, I mean it blows hard and then it goes down. So he is using the words lives or dies. And full grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne. And then another music, there is another music in autumn season. One is the music of these knots. Then he talks about the full grown lambs. Full grown lambs, they bleat from the hilly areas, they bleat from different fields. That too produces a kind of music in the autumn season. Fully grown lambs that make their ba 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 sounds from the fence of their hilly enclosure, where they have been enclosed, where they have been kept for the night now. Hedge crickets sing. Cricket is again an insect, and he says that hedge cricket hedges those bushes. He says that these crickets sing in the bushes, and now with treble soft the red breast whistles from a garden croft. And then he talks about the red-breasted bird. This red breast is a bird, red-breasted bird that softly whistles from a small garden. It too whistles, it produces a whistling sound from a garden croft, from a small garden. And gathering swallows twitter in the sky, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. And now the last music which is there in the autumn season is the swallows, those birds which rise and sing together towards the end of the day. They twitter, they sing together in the skies, and thus the day ends and the evening is there. So in stanza number 1, he talks about the autumn season, the fruits, how sun helps the fruits to grow, to get ripe. And then he talks about different kinds of fruits, the bees, the flowers, etc. In the next season, he personifies autumn season. He personifies him as a laborer, a farmer, a winnower, a gleaner, and a harvester. And then towards the third stanza, he compares spring season with autumn, and then he urges autumn season not to think about the songs of the spring. And then he talks about different music which is being produced in autumn season by those fellows, red-breasted birds, lambs, knots, hedge crickets, etc. So this is how can summarize this poem. Now you have next this slide in front of you, where I have talked about the the poem. It has been written on 19 September 1819 after an evening walk near Winchester along the river Aitchen. It was published in 1820, and it is last of his 6 odes, because it has been written it got published just 1 year before his death, because John Keats died uh, in 1821, and the other odes which were written with this poem are Ode to Grecian Urn, Ode on Indolence, Ode to Nightingale, etc. So this is something about the poem. Then as far as stanza number 1 is concerned, this is the critical analysis of the poem. As far as stanza number 1 is concerned, it is about the natural beauty of the season. The rich imagery has been used, the imagery of flowers, ripe fruits, apples, bees, cottage trees, hazel shells. So when you when you recite the stanza number 1 of the poem, these images come in front of you. In stanza number 2, like I told you when I was discussing the poem with you, it is the season has been personified. It has been personified as a winnower, a harvester, a gleaner, a farmer, or a laborer, an agricultural laborer. In stanza number 3, There is comparison with the spring, and then he talks about the evening scene, the dying of the day, and the music produced by different insects, birds, and lambs. See, this poem is a typical romantic poem in the sense that it has subjectivity, it has feelings, it has spontaneity, it has the diction, the language used is very simple, and there are lots of images which come in front of you when you recite the poem. Then the imagination is at its peak, and obviously music is there. I won't give you the explanation of these points because it is out of the scope, because you people are undergraduate students. So just a kind of cursory idea where you will get to know what are the romantic features of the poem, so they are in front of you. And after that, what are the different themes of the poem? This is very important, this is very important. The different themes are beauty. So when you read the poem, the beauty of the nature is discussed. So this is one of the important aspects of romantic poetry. The death, mortality is discussed. Like I said, he talks about the day, and then when the day dies and evening comes towards the third stanza of the poem. So death is one of the important themes of the poem. Then the value of the present, are finding beauty at unexpected places and situations. Most of the times we people feel that only spring season is beautiful, but the poet gives us a kind of lesson that we should feel that even autumn season has its own beauty, it has its own music, it has its own you know images and flowers, fruits around. So we should value the present. Whatever you have with you, you should learn to value that. And then there is another very important theme, that is the power of the nature, which is, because he talks about the power of the nature, how nature produces fruits, how nature produces different flowers, how honeybees work, and honey is produced, etc. So these are some of the important themes of the poem: beauty, death, value of the present, finding beauty at unexpected places and situations, and the power of nature. So this is all about the poem. Thank you. Now, if anybody has any question related to what I said, I repeat, I have not critically analyzed the poem. The reason is that you are undergraduate students and you are from semester second. So I tried to be as simple as possible. And this poem is in your general English syllabus. It is not there in your English literature syllabus. And the questions asked are usually simple. So I tried to be as simple as possible. Now, if you have any question, if any student has any question, you can ask. I can give you an idea what we discussed in the two lectures. First, we discussed what is an ode, the parts, forms, different English poets who have written odes. Then we discussed the short biography of the poet. Then we discussed the famous poems written by John Keats. Then we read the text of the poem, the summary of the poem, introduction of the poem to the poem, then the critical analysis, then the romantic features of the poem, because John Keats was a romantic poet, and then the different themes of the poem. Now, if any student has any question, you can ask. Thank you.